Hey, tree huggers and tree lovers. This is Suzanne, and we are at 100 for Trees. We have an amazing guest today, but before we bring her on, I just want to mention thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all supporting this. We and the trees really appreciate this. I wanted to explain 100 for Trees is where I run 100 miles every month to raise awareness and funds to plant trees because I love trees. And so if you guys want to check us out, we're at 100fortrees.com, or you can go on our Facebook page, which is 100 for Trees, and also what is your 100? So without further ado, we are going to bring on our amazing guest, Sara Artemisia. I love that her last name has the word art in it. I think that's so cool. That should tell you a lot about her right now. Okay, she is a plant spirit wisdom teacher. She does flower essence practitioner. She is also a financial coach. Yes, guys, she mixes the two. And the host of the Plant Spirit podcast, which is how I found her. I found her on YouTube, guys. She's awesome. Go check out her podcast. She's got a ton of great guests on there. You can learn so much. She helps wellness professionals and empaths, if that's you out there, clear their inner blocks, transform their experience with money. Who doesn't want to do that? And connect more deeply with their intuitive gifts and the earth. That's what we're all about. Okay, so without further ado, I want to bring her on because I want to talk to her so bad. So here we go, Sara!
Suzanne, thank you so much for having me on today. Just so great to connect.
Oh, thank you so much. Y'all, she is super busy. She's got a ton of really cool things going on in the world. She gives back so much, and she does it in so many different facets, and I can't wait to hear you talk about it, Sara. But I just wanted to thank you before we get into everything that you do and say thank you. So real quick, I found you on YouTube. I love plants. I was actually following an animal communicator, and she led me somehow to the path of plant communicating, which led me to you. And I listened to several of your podcasts, and I was like, this chick is so cool. She'll never come on my podcast, but I asked anyway. And then, yes, the universe listened, and here she is. So that should tell you a lot about Sara. She's a cool chick. She gives back. So if somebody was just being introduced to you, how would you describe who you are, what you do, and why plants?
Oh, wow. That is such a great question. Let's see. Oh, my goodness. So I would say to start, I think just really, I love plants. That's a great place to start.
Right? Need we say more?
I love plants. And I think for me, the real big thing around that is just recognizing how there is so much in the world that feels dysfunctional, fragmented. There's such a feeling and experience of fracturing that a lot of people are experiencing right now. And for me, when I connect with the plants, which is pretty much all the time, that I have this sense of connecting with a state of wholeness. And I feel like when we connect in with nature very deeply, that we can see and feel an experience of wholeness reflected back to us. And so we can then remember our own innate state of wholeness as well, that can sometimes feel hard to access in the human experience at this point on the planet. And so I would say that really, that a huge part, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's working with plants, with money, with helping people clear their blocks around money, that really everything is oriented to reconnecting to our innate state of wholeness and different ways to remember how to do that. And the plants and nature really, really support doing that. I feel like in such an incredibly direct way.
Oh, that's a beautiful answer. I hope everyone heard that. I love the word connection. That's so beautiful, especially in a fragmented world. And I apologize when the commercials run behind me. And I have a dog over here. So, my apologies for that. Let me just go past this real quick. My audience is used to me doing this now. So, okay. So if somebody doesn't really know a lot about you and they're like, hey, Sara, and it's the first time they meet you, they run into you in the grocery store. What does Sara, I hate this question, what do you do? But what is Sara about?
Yeah, so I, of course, as you shared earlier, I'm a plant spirit wisdom teacher. And so I help people really learn how to communicate with plants. That is really the essence of what I do and what I love so much. I'm also a financial abundance coach. And so I help people to clear their blocks with money, both on an energetic, emotional, and practical level, and then create a financial plan for themselves that they can move forward with, which for folks in particular who are connected with the arts, who are creatives, who are empaths, wellness professionals, oftentimes there can be a lot of stories around money and how to be in a good way with that in this life. And so I really help people to clear that out as well. And I also have a podcast, the Plant Spirit Podcast. So if you have not checked that out yet, I would recommend that you go check that out on any of your favorite pod platforms as well.
Let's put that up there real quick. I forgot to put that up. Plant Spirit Podcast. Y'all, it's awesome. I went on there, and so you can see her right now, but on her podcast, sometimes you can only hear her. And I could tell she was smiling the whole time. She just had this energy and who she was talking with. And so it's all legit, y'all, very authentic. I love this the word practical used with the word finances. I love that you were talking about blockages. And I kind of want to ask you, so in this fragmented world, I love how you said that we can get so confused by the exterior, the circumstances, if you will. And yet there's people who want to help. And there's this feeling sometimes of just being stuck. And I like how you use the word blockages. And it's so many times it's related to finances first, then usually some sort of health relationship, something like that. But finances is where you focus on, and I like that. What would you say to the person who's like, Sara, this is all I'm seeing. This is just what I see in the world. How do you use plants, nature to reach them, to get them to remember who they are, as you said, which is, I love that. That's wonderful.
That is such a great question. So the thing that I love about the plants so much is that they can help us. In my experience, I found they can help us on every single level, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And it doesn't matter where the person is, or say, for example, if someone is struggling with, like, maybe they just got a scrape on their knee and they're out in the, hiking, and they're like, I want to, heal this scrape on my knee. They can just take a piece of plantain, chew it up, and put it right on the scrape, and it will help heal that. And so there's this very physical way that the plants can help us, but they also can help us with feeling. What's coming to mind in this moment is the ancient Japanese practice of Shinrin Yoku that was really supported by the Japanese government starting in 1983, where people will go out and do forest bathing, that this is not prescribed by their doctors in Japan. And so being around plants can really be mentally and emotionally supportive as well. And then spiritually, which is so much of what I focus on in the podcast, that there is such a sense of, again, just coming back to this state of wholeness, how when we are surrounded in an ecosystem or environment of wholeness, it helps us to attune or align with that state within ourselves. And so the thing that I love about plants so much is that we can get really esoteric with it. And also we can look very practically at, say, for example, there's a rose bush that's 3 feet from my desk, and I work with rose all the time as a result. And so we can, for example, just look at a rose and study on this very practical level. How does the rose unfold? How does the rose operate? And so taking rose as an example, we can see, okay, the petals are unfolding from the inside out. The rose is not concerned with what the 5th petal out from now is going to look like. It is just very much in the moment of its unfolding. The flowers are absolutely beautiful. And also with rose has an incredibly woody stem and really intense thorns and deep roots. And so I love working with the medicine of rose, because rose shows us how it is possible to both be incredibly soft, open in the heart, unfolding from the inside out, be present in the moment, and also be incredibly rooted, grounded into the earth, and have really good boundaries. And these are all lessons that I feel like any of us can learn from and incorporate into our life. And so for me, whenever I'm feeling at a crossroads or a choice point in life, or maybe struggling with how to move forward in something, it could even be something really technical like spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets as well, which really brings in the financial piece there too. But just to ask, how do I move forward with this? I will put this question out there of, well, how would nature do this? How would nature move forward with this? And it can really help to very quickly, efficiently. I also really love efficiency. It can help us to really efficiently arrive at an answer, because nature, we can look to the history of how nature has been evolving for what, over 4 billion years at this point, where humans have come on the scene much more recently. And so as humans, they are our elders on this planet, the plants are. And so we can turn to them and just we can ask very directly if we're communicating with them, or if if you don't know how to communicate with plants directly yet, you can just look to, okay, how do they do it? How are they functioning? How are they operating in the world? For example, how plants communicate and exchange nutrients through the mycelial network. Like, that is a very efficient way of communicating, just like we do through technology or through the internet, right? Like, plants do that through the mycelial network. And so to me, they are such incredible guides and models and teachers and healers. I mean, they literally do support healing. It's just incredible. And I know for you, obviously being so connected with the trees, I feel such a deep, deep connection with the trees, and how, in just studying their physical structure of how they are oriented, we can see how to be more just an encouragement of, stand really tall, stand tall, be aligned, be rooted into the earth, feel a connection with the sky. That I feel like by studying plants, we really can understand how to be better humans.
Wow. You just start talking and then you stop and I'm like, oh, that was great. I wrote down a couple of things, but the first thing that hit me as you started talking, I could feel your passion and your energy. When did that start? When did you realize I love plants? Do you have a story, or is it just like, oh, in the womb, pretty much acceptance?
Yeah. Definitely more towards the second one. I've always loved plants so much. And, I'm so grateful to my parents for we grew an organic garden, just in each of, I'm the oldest of 4 kids. And, we each had our own little 6x6 plot where we could grow things. And so being outside, we'd go on family hikes and this sort of a thing when I was young, which I kind of, begrudged it at the time at certain points, but now looking back, I'm so grateful for that, because it really instilled in me a love of nature from a very young age. So that's the first thing. The second thing that is so pivotally important for me in my journey with plants as well, that I'm also really grateful for, is that I was raised Quaker. Which, are you familiar with the Quakers at all?
A little bit, but feel free to tell us anything in case our audience isn't familiar with that.
Yeah, which they might not be, because it's a very niche, I guess I would say subsect of Christianity. So the Quakers are primarily based in Pennsylvania. I was telling you earlier, I grew up in Pennsylvania.
That's right.
And, yeah. And so William Penn came over, I think, in the 1600s or something, and started, a bunch of Quakers there. And so Quakers are very unique, I would say, in their orientation and worldview of understanding that everyone has an inner light. Everyone has an inner light. And all of the services are held completely in silence. And whether you're 5 or 85, or back in the day, if you're a man or a woman, it was kind of revolutionary in that way. You could stand up, share, if you felt the inner light speaking to you, you could share your message and then sit back down. And then the rest of the service would just go back into silence. And so from that, there was this encouragement from a very young age of both, one, listening to the wisdom within, and also that everyone has an inner light, just that was just a given. And also that it is important in order to access the inner wisdom, it's important to be quiet. And so having this as a foundation from a really young age, because of course, when we're kids, we just grow up and whatever's happening, we think that's normal. And so for me, I'm like, well, of course everyone has an inner light. And so from a really young age, I felt this connection with the inner light of plants. It was like, whereas with people, I feel there can often be a lot of, traumas and crap layered on top of the light that we have to sift through to really get to the core of the beauty of who that person is sometimes. With plants, it's so easy. There's no layers, there's no masks layered on top. With the plants, it's like they are who they are, and they're radiating out their inner light all the time, which to me, again, that is such an incredible model for how to live. Like, how is it possible to live like that? And so this just this query that I have in the background going all the time is, how is it possible to live as a human like that as well, and to let the act of living be the response to that. Which, thank you for sharing that about the podcast, just feeling so much joy. I mean, to me, that's really the core of it all, is that the plants have so much joy, and I experience so much joy when I'm around them. And that is, I'm like, that in itself is kind of a revolutionary act in this day and age that we live in. And I just think it's absolutely incredible how simple and how accessible it is. It's so accessible, even if it's just, if you live in a city and it's just seeing a little dandelion in the crack in the concrete, or if there's a park nearby that you can go just sit and put your hand on a tree, or just recognize, even if you can't get outside, just recognizing that our very breath, that we are living in reciprocal relationship with the plants all the time by the very act of breathing, that our exhale is their inhale and their exhale is our inhale. Like, that is incredible to me. It just mind-blowingly amazing. And we take it for granted, right? Because it's, again, so normalized that we just think, well, of course. And yet, if we take a step back and look at how miraculous that is, that's really incredible.
Absolutely. I just want that to hang there for a minute. I absolutely agree with that. I used to teach anatomy and physiology, and when we did the respiratory system, I started it off by drawing a picture of a tree and then the lungs, and it looks like an upside down tree when you look at it. And I would always point out to everyone, we need them, but they don't need us, And I know that was probably kind of divisive, but I was like, just reminding you out there. Whenever you were speaking about just maybe even seeing a plant or touching a tree, you mentioned earlier communicating with plants. How do you describe that? And then help someone, maybe what would you say to the person who's like, plants, you can't communicate with plants, how does that even work? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a great question. So
it's not my personal opinion, by the way. I just hear it all the time.
Oh yeah, no, I hear it too. It makes complete sense. It makes complete sense because we have forgotten largely how our ancestors used to live in relationship. All of our ancestors all over the earth used to live in deep relationship with the natural world. And so this way of communicating, it's not anything new. It's actually just remembering what our ancient ancestors already knew how to do, which was to be in relationship with the natural world. And so when we look at plant communication, the important thing to remember is that they're not highly likely not going to be communicating in English. They're not going to be communicating in this very mental linear language that they teach us. For me, because and each of us has ways of knowing. Like, say if you walk into a room and someone has just told a funny joke, and you can just feel it kind of hanging in the air, versus you walk into a room and someone has just had a really intense argument. It's like we can feel that. It's like, well, how would we logically be able to know that or feel that anything had happened, because we weren't actually physically there to witness it? And so in that same way, plant communication happens in that same type of way, where it's likely not going to come in through that linear language of, grammatically structured sentence kind of a thing. Rather, the plants communicate in ways that are utilizing multiple senses. So this could be somatically. Like, for me, often I will feel messages through the plants in my body about maybe their healing gifts, what they can support with, things like this. Or it might be through, another way that I receive a lot of messages is visually. And so oftentimes the plants will show me different things that also they support with through different visuals that come in. Or it might be hearing directly. Or it might be, if you're just starting out for the very first time, looking at the plant in a similar way, like we were talking about rose, of really just studying how the plant physically is structured, and what are some metaphors that could be gained through that. That can be a really direct way of plant communication, is just studying the very physicality of the plant, because the plants express themselves in everything that they do. Who they are, the very core of their being is expressed through every single layer, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so if a person is approaching a plant and they're saying, maybe the person approaching the plant is not spiritual at all, which is totally fine. You could just go in very much through the physicality of the plant, and the plant will tell you so much about who it is. I mean, you can even study the ecosystem around who else is growing around here. Are there signs of animal activity? Are there any signs of animals interacting with this plant at all? Like for food or shelter or anything like that. Have you seen are there any birds resting in the trees? Is this a habitat for an entire micro ecosystem in this forest? That there's so many things that we can learn about plants just by witnessing. And one of the most important things about that, I was just talking with a client about this yesterday, is how it's a really interesting time to be alive as a human for many reasons. But one of them is that our attention span is so hyper focused in such a micro way, to the point of even just, whatever the next scroll up is showing us to focus at, we're focusing on, kind of a thing, that our attention has gotten so hyper focused that we become almost very narrow. Our view is very narrow often because we're just focusing on something very, very specific. In nature, the way that nature communicates is very much more from a defocalized awareness or a defocalized consciousness, which in the human experience, you could think of that as like peripheral vision, right? Like if you are crossing the street and you see out of your peripheral vision, maybe someone's coming up on a bike real quick that you didn't see before, or a car suddenly turns a corner, you can react to that because you have that peripheral awareness, where if you are only focused on the very thing in front of you, you're going to miss that really important information. And so nature is operating in that peripheral awareness all the time. And it's basically like relaxing the gaze, relaxing the eyes, or you could think of it as, I like to think of it really as listening. When we're looking at something, listening through the eyes, rather than looking at the plant. What is it like if I relax my vision and let the images come into me as if I was listening through my eyeballs? It's a completely different way of orienting to receiving information. And it's also really relaxing. It also helps our nervous systems totally decompress. It helps, cortisol levels lower. This is why forest bathing is prescribed by doctors in Japan, because it does really help it helps us on all the levels, the mental, physical, emotional, spiritual levels as well. And so just the very act of being in the presence of plants supports that. And so if you have never communicated with plants ever in your life, which most people have not, so it's completely understandable.
That they're aware of.
Yeah, they're exactly. Yes, exactly. Oh my goodness. Thank you for bringing that up. I cannot even count how many times my students will say, the Plant Spirit Wisdom Academy, if you want to learn very deeply how to communicate with plants and really open up to your intuitive gifts more, you could do that. And I can't even count how many times my students, towards the end of that, they'll look back, this inventory of their life and recognize the plants were always there, even back to early childhood memories that maybe we'll forget. I even had that happen to myself actually a couple of weeks ago, where I realized there was this memory, it was coming up, and I realized there was this one tree in our front yard that was actually always there, supportively present for that. And it's amazing to me how they are such humble, powerful healers. The plants are so humble. And I love that. And again, that's just like such a great, how is it possible to live as a human in this world, humble and powerful? Because a lot of times we see this really intense juxtaposition of, people who are really humble, people who are really powerful. It's like the plants bring those two together. And it's really amazing how we can see that is possible. And just the magic that unfolds out of that when we embrace that in ourselves. It's really amazing.
I love this. I'm like, okay, we only have a certain amount of time. Like, oh, this is so wonderful. I real quick to what you just said, the humble yet powerful, for example, tree that's always there. Like that almost made me tear up when you were saying that, because I think anyone who's listening to you can automatically, without meaning to, have a flashback of some moment where there was probably emotion involved in it, but that tree gave some comfort. That plant gave some comfort. That flower gave some comfort. And it just does that just by being it. And that's what I got. Whenever you said that, it was like, that's how many times have we just ran past a tree and that tree was just giving? I mean, like that poem, The Giving Tree. I want to talk about trees forever, but there's so much information that I'd love for you to share. Whenever you were mentioning your clients, and you had mentioned finances, you help people with finances, and I would love to hear a little bit about that. How do you put these two together? How have you? Just tell me whatever you want to tell me about that.
Well, yeah, thanks so much. Oftentimes, and even my own dad, he's like, how are you doing? How are they even connected? How is that remotely possible? But for me, they are super connected, because it comes back to that thing we were talking about at the beginning of, really, how do we connect in with our innate state of wholeness? How is that even possible in this world today? And so in study, both because I love nature, of course, and I love talking about money, that they of course go together. It's like, we could look at that. We could look at connecting through wholeness through any modality. I mean, it could be ceramics, it could be exercise, like it could be literally any modality, because I personally feel very connected with nature and money. Those are the modalities that I work with primarily. And so it's really interesting to look around and see, okay, there's so much dysfunction on the planet. What if certain things were changed? Like, what needs to be changed in order for people in general to come back to states of wholeness? Definitely our relationship with nature. If we all had a really good, solid, connected relationship with nature, there would be a lot more experience of wholeness on the planet. Also money. Like, think about how much dysfunction and destruction and suffering is happening around the world because of people's relationship with money. It's really intense. It's like, yeah, I know, right? I'm like, that is crazy. So there were a couple of ways when I was first starting out with this, because I'm a very systems oriented person, where I was thinking, okay, there's a couple ways that, and I studied organizational financial management for my graduate degree. And just a quick backstory, grew up, my parents had a very dysfunctional relationship with money, highly, highly dysfunctional. And I love to work with archetypes. Yeah, most people do. And so, at around age 25, my husband and I we took our VW bus down to Baja to do our yoga teacher training. And, we're driving back up. It broke down 3 times in the trip. And we just pulled into a gas station in Arizona. I just broke down. I had an emotional breakdown as well. And I just thought, am I destined to be poor for the rest of my life? Like, what even is money? Like, how do you even have a good relationship with it? That then led me to a very deep dive for the next 12 years, including going to grad school, multiple financial coaching certifications, to really explore this question of, how is it possible for money and the heart to be in a good way together? Is it even possible? Is that even possible? Because the narrative that I was raised with is, either you work a soul-sucking corporate job and hate your life and be completely disconnected from anything that's real and good in the world, or you're totally in the heart and broke. And that's it. Those are 2 options. And so, in my mid-20s, I was like, wait, is that even true? Or is that just a story that I am living out as if it were true, perpetuating my parents' narratives as if it were true? And just like with all of life, really, oftentimes by the time we're about age 4, these subconscious patterns that we have witnessed from our parents, we adopt those as if they are true, because we just normalize things. Oh, well, this is just how life is, whether or not, and it could be totally pre-verbal. Like, it might not even be, oh, I'm saying this. Like a kid couldn't even articulate that that's what they're believing to be true at that point. But then oftentimes, as with everything, and definitely with money, will grow up and will continue to live those same narratives. And the thing that I find is so interesting is that oftentimes people will either perpetuate the same exact way that their parents are relating to money, or they will do a 180 and do a complete rebellion against it. Like, my brother's a great example of that, where, parents were just like hippies, just hated money. Money was the root of all evil, kind of a thing. And he's like, okay, I'm going to get really structured and save a lot of money and, buy a really beautiful house by the time I'm 30 or something, and it's just like, okay, that's great. It's very interesting to see, though, how there can be this incredible pendulum swing with how people relate to money based on how their parents, and basically going back through the lineage, oriented to money as well. And so,
do you think that's generational? Real quick, do you think that goes back like beyond lifetimes?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so it's really interesting because the way that I approach the financial coaching work is very unique, very different from the way the way most financial coaches do, in that first we look at this subconscious emotional layer, which goes back generations. And in this moment, what is coming up for me around that is a story of a client that I had where she was getting engaged to the man that she loved. They were pregnant together. So, beautiful, amazing, so much happiness in that. And yet every single time they talked about money, she would break down into tears. And she's like, I don't even know why. I don't even know why this is so hard. Because she was also, a very successful manager of a wellness studio. She'd been sober for 10 years. Like, she was very grounded in her being and in her healing process, and also very financially successful as well. And yet money caused her so much grief. And so we then took a look back at, okay, well, what was her mom's experience with money? Her mom was a single mom, very, very stressed out around money all the time. So she had perpetuated that down to her daughter, who was my client. I then asked her, okay, well, where did your mom get that from? And so then she looked back at her grandma. She's like, oh yeah, interestingly, my grandma had the same exact type of pattern with money. And she was pregnant with a little baby girl. And so it's like, with this work with money, we are not just doing it even for ourselves. We are doing it to heal the entire lineage going back and forward. It's like, that is really, really powerful. So first we look at the emotional subconscious experience with money. Also, then we bring in the archetypes. I love the archetypes of really looking at essentially kind of like parts work of, maybe you have, so for me, for example, with my parents, my mom was a total innocent ostrich, puts her head in the sand around money. My dad was a total creator artist. We're just living for the philosophical ideals. Money is the root of all evil, very love-hate relationship kind of a thing. And so I, as their kid, combined those two, and that's how I was orienting to money until I took a step back, which we all have the ability to do, and consciously look at what is the story that I have been living out with money, and is that actually true for me on a core level? So once we go through with looking, we start out with the money bio, where someone will, from the very beginning of their life till now, which some of my clients are in their 70s, so that's a very long money story, go through every single year. What is a memory they have around money? And so most people at the beginning, they'll just say, well, how can I even remember what happened when I was 11? But then, so I coach them through that. And then it just becomes a full-on biography, because money is linked to every single layer of life. Every single layer of life, every relationship has some element of an experience with money. Maybe it's even just going out to dinner with friends and it's really awkward splitting the bill, or maybe it's really easy, you know what I mean? But there's just some kind of experience with money, because money is so inherently woven into the very fabric of our lives, just like nature is also very inherently woven into the fabric of our lives. And so it's really important for these things that are inherently woven into the fabric of our lives for us to look at, what is my relationship to that thing that is literally linked with every single layer of my experience, and how do I have a clear relationship with it? So after we do the emotional subconscious work, then we go into the deeper energetic layers. And then by that point, people are ready to create the practical plan. Because, and again, this is from my own direct experience, before doing all that inner work around money, if I just went, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to make a budget and I'm going to stick to it. It lasts for maybe a few months, and then just go right back to the old patterns.
Right.
Yeah, because it's too topical, right? And so with any kind of healing work, yes, when we decide to do something and we really want to stick to it, and maybe our mind is really convinced and our will is really convinced, I absolutely want to do this, that can sometimes last for a little while. But oftentimes, if we have these deeper patterns that are sabotaging that, which you look at the archetypes, it's like that archetype is going to come in and sabotage that every single time, because there's this inner part of us that doesn't understand how to do it any differently. Even if our mind tells, no, but you can do it. Just get out of bed at 6 a.m. and do that thing. It's like, no, there's a part of our, exactly. So it's really interesting with the plant piece, with the nature piece with money, because being so connected with plants and with nature, the plants are with me all the time. It's like, you can't see them all behind me right now, but it's like, it's Sara and the plants. It's like, this is how I go through life. And so if I am working with a client, I'm like, it's us. Like,
I get it.
It's like, look, they're all behind you. Exactly. Exactly. So
Go ahead.
yeah,
I'm
I
sorry.
just love that. No, it's so true. It's just it's so interesting too, because as humans, we have been conditioned to believe that we are so separate, that we are these individuals. And yes, of course we are. And yet, and also, we are very connected to every other living being on this planet. It is on our home planet. We're all connected here. So understanding that, if I'm working with a client who loves nature, say like is an herbalist, or a botanist, just loves plants, I'll bring plants very consciously into working with the different metaphors of, if your life was an ecosystem, how would money function in that system? Would it function like water, or would it be something that pushed off to the side? Which is like, okay, if you think about money and water as that metaphor, if
That's
you
good.
are trying to have a healthy ecosystem and you say, I don't want water to be a part of this, or maybe like some of the other clients I work with, their water's super dammed up. It's like they built a giant beaver dam because they're just hoarding it for that rainy day that might never come, and they don't even let themselves spend it on things that really give them a lot of joy, even though they have $50,000 extra dollars that they don't even need, just saved in a savings account that's not even returning a lot of interest or something. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
right. Oh my God, that's another podcast right there.
Yeah, totally. I will bring those metaphors in if the person I'm talking to is a quote unquote nature person. If they're not, though, I don't feel the need to be bringing that out front and center in the financial coaching work, because it's like the plants are here whether people feel them and see them or not. So I don't need to always be talking about plants in the financial coaching work, because it's just inherently interwoven into the frameworks and the ways that I'm looking at orienting to money, which is from a very holistic standpoint. But it doesn't need to be spoken if people are not, like, I've worked with construction managers and things, and it's like, they're not going to be interested in talking about that. And that's totally fine, because if they are able to buy the house that they want to buy and pay off their student loans and save up for retirement, that's all they need to do to live their life fully. And again, just coming back to that core theme, which for whatever reason just keeps coming up today for me, is of reconnecting with our wholeness. That for that construction manager, he doesn't need to be talking about plants. Like, that's not how he's orienting to life. And yet, when he is feeling good with his experience with money, he is able to be himself more fully in this world. And so that ultimately is, I mean, to me, I would say he is, of course, inherently always connected with plants from my perspective, because he's breathing, but not everyone has that framework. And so it's really important for me in my work to meet people where they're at. That's really important. Just like how the plants do it. The plants do that exact same thing. They meet us where we are at, which is just amazing.
I was just about to point that out. I was going to say, do you realize that you said that earlier when you were describing plants, that they meet us with where we're at, which is what we want. We want, we don't want to be judged. We want people and our animals, and our plants to meet us where we're at. That's so true. That's great. Okay. So so when you were 25 and you're having this, I just real quick, I want to back up, and you're having this, because I think a lot of people can relate to this. So this is a part that I feel like gets skipped over by so many people who are like, yeah, it used to be really rough for me, and now I'm like, I make $80,000 in a fraction of a second. And it's like, but hang on now, you're not really relating to everybody. So you're describing to us in this moment of traveling back, and the VW bug. Is that what you said? Broke down
It's
third
bust,
time.
but yeah.
Bus, even better. Even better visual now. I love those. and so you're having this moment of like, okay, am I destined to be like this? What happened in that moment that you realized I have control over this?
So yeah, I totally forgot to share that earlier. So I have a tendency, my sense is you are probably like this, because you literally run 100 miles a month, right? For trees.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm very all or nothing. I'm like a very all or nothing kind of person. And so when I realized that, about when I had that breakdown at the gas station, and I was asking myself this question of, what even is money actually? Like, I don't even understand what it actually really is, even though I'm interacting with it all the time and having this weird, at that point, this weird dance of like very love-hate experience around it. I then thought, okay, well, what do I need to do to really actually understand what it is? So I then the very next, as soon as we got home, I went, obviously did all the laundry and everything wrapped up from the trip, and then went to the library and got out 12 books on personal finance and just read straight through them. So, so that's how I started. And then, of course, because I just read 12 books on personal finance, my interest is completely peaked. I'm like, this is amazing. Look at all this incredible knowledge I didn't have 1 week ago. And so I love that, of course, about libraries. Like that is,
yes.
It's
free
free
knowledge.
Right? Yes. Yeah. And of course, obviously anywhere on the internet as well, but something I just love about picking up a good book. So, so learning that. And then one of the books was, there have been a few very key, pivotal, life-changing books in my life. One of them was in this stack of 12 books, and it was called It's Not About the Money. It's called It's Not About the Money by this guy, Brent Kessel, who manages millions of dollars in a financial advising firm that he's had going for several decades. He's also been doing yoga and meditation since the 80s. And so in that book where he's talking about it's not about the money, he talks a lot about these subconscious patterns, archetypes, things like this. And so that was a very pivotally shifting moment for me. And I realized I really wanted to study this much more deeply. And so I then went to grad school for organizational financial management and started looking at specifically through things like social enterprises, nonprofits, like how is it possible to be very mission driven or, feeling a very deep sense of purpose and wanting to help out in the world and also make it financially sustainable. And so for my grad thesis for that, I decided to interview executives around the country who are running different retreat centers and ask them, number one, about their philosophy of money, their personal philosophy, their company philosophy around money, and then how was that actually reflected in the financials of the company? And it was really, really fascinating because, for example, like one of the executives I interviewed for that was Skip Backus, who at that time was the CEO for the Omega Institute, which is based out of Rhinebeck, New York. Oprah, people like that would go there for retreats and that sort of a thing. And their annual budget is $23 million a year, or it was at that point when I interviewed him. And so I asked him, what about his philosophy with money and how is that reflected in the actual financials? And he shared something really interesting with me that has stuck with me to this day, where he said, if you are trying to bring something forward in the world, like you are a very mission-based person or organization or business, and there is someone else who is doing something very, very similar to you, or maybe even pretty much the exact same thing, rather than seeing them as competition, they are actually collaborators because they are furthering the very thing that you want to be bringing into the world. And so therefore, the very thing that you want to be bringing into the world is reaching more people as a result of someone else also doing this, which to me, looking back from the standpoint of where I am now, I'm like, that is exactly how nature does that. Nature is not competitive. Nature is collaborative. And so this is really key, I think, because there's a lot of scarcity mindset of, oh, if I'm making more money, for example, with the clients that I work with, a lot of times, if I'm making more money, someone else is making less. And it's like, no, that it doesn't work. It's like, you don't have to make yourself more poor for other people to have more money. Like, that's not how that works. That's not how that works. So it's really interesting. That was really, really eye-opening. And then conversely to that, the executives that I interviewed who were on a shoestring budget, I'd ask them, start out, okay, well, what's your philosophy around money? No surprises, exactly like my parents, just money's the root of all evil. We try not to deal with it as much as possible. We just want to live the mission. And it's like, well, if you don't have money, it's like with one of my the amazing book, another one that I loved about social enterprise and social entrepreneurship by Peter Brinkerhoff, where he shared, without money, there is no mission output. And so it's really important, if there are things that you want to do in this life, money can be an ally for your life purpose. Money can be an ally for your life purpose. And so a lot of the work that I do with folks is really bringing that into the fold of like, if your life purpose, what you feel so passionate about in life is to do a certain, like running for trees, it could be art, there's so many things that what would happen if you brought money into the fold of that, so that money supported the very mission of what you are wanting to bring into the world? It's going to exponentially magnify in terms of how it can help the world, how you can help the world. And so that is honestly at the very core of it. That is what I am doing with money, is working with money as a giant tool for transformational healing on the planet. Just like in the same way that I work with nature. It's the same thing.
Giant transformational tool. I love that. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Is that one of your, do you have that anywhere, like on your website or anything like that?
I probably, yeah, I'm sure I have it on the website somewhere.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's so important, because I mean, we look around the world and there's so much that needs changing. There's so much that needs to be transformed. And when we can find something that really truly does help a transformational change from within, so that we can then actually make a bigger difference in the world, great.
Yes.
We should do that, like whatever that is. And if there are certain things that are holding us back from doing that, could be any kind of inner belief systems, clear those out so that you can fully do the thing that you feel connected to. And so often there is some kind of narrative around money that is holding us back from fully stepping into who we are in this world. And I'm like, get rid of that so that you can fully be who you are fully in this world. Because that's what the world needs. We need more people who are fully themselves.
Absolutely. Authenticity. Absolutely. Yeah. You're like a puzzle piece. And if you change your piece, it doesn't fit in the puzzle. The whole puzzle doesn't work.
Exactly. And that's another huge teaching from the plants that I just am so grateful to them for, is that the plants are not trying to be anything or anyone other than exactly who they are. Like this rose bush right here is not trying to look like that cedar tree that is 20 feet away. It's just, they are who they are fully. And when I look to the plants and I see how they are who they are fully, look at the beauty that comes out of that. Like if a rose was trying to be a cedar tree and hating on itself because it didn't look a certain way, and like, whatever, it's like, no, like the rose is not supposed to be the cedar. Yeah. It's like hating on itself because it had thorns or something. It's like, no, that is beautiful. That is amazing. And so I love that. It is truly by studying nature and just developing this very deep connected relationship with nature that I have learned to love myself fully, because I'm like, look, if I love the plants are exactly who they are. I am also a part of nature. I can love myself like that, because it's like, I am just like the plants. I am who I am fully, just like they are who they are fully. And that is amazing. And we should all be doing that.
Another high five. Double high five. Oh man, that is beautiful. That's the name of the game right there. So I have to ask you for my own personal, because I know that we're under a time crunch here. So I just want to make sure I get some of this in. I can keep going on any of these subjects and rabbit holes. This is great. Thank you so much. So do you hug trees?
I actually just meditate with them more.
Okay.
I like to sit with my back to the tree, because I feel when my back is to the tree, there's something about my back being really open. I guess it's like a back hug or something, I would say, but it's like I can feel it's almost like I can feel discern the inward flow of sap or something. It's just easier for me to feel that, probably because it's like my spine is straight up and down too, so there's this like spine to spine kind of experience that I have that I just absolutely love. But yeah, it's funny, I'll go on hikes, and my husband likes to joke we don't get more than 100 yards into the hike because I'm just enamored with the beauty of nature. And it's so amazing to just, even looking at one square little foot, right at the base of a tree, it's like there's so much life there. There's so much happening
right there.
So yeah, I do want to ask though, for you, just if because I really would love to know, just how did you get connected to trees? Because I love when you first reached out and shared what you're doing. I'm like, this is amazing. Aww. This is amazing what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, same to you. It kind of takes one to know one, and it's I truly I truly love trees. I can remember being a little girl and I felt alone a lot and I didn't have many friends where I lived. And I didn't, there wasn't like a real strong family, like brothers and sisters all playing together, having each other's back kind of thing. And so I would go and run and ride my bike around where we lived, and there were trees everywhere, and I just used to love to be around them and underneath them and touching them, and it felt so good. And I would even make up like stories and feel so creative and so alive and connected, and very much about kind of how you're describing it too. A lot of those words pop up. And I used to run a whole lot, through the pastures that I probably wasn't supposed to be in. And because they were just open, and then there'd be like a grove of trees, and I'd run from grove to grove and run around the trees. And so as I've gotten older, I still love running. And there's just something about running around through trees. They're just, you truly, the best word I can think of is you just feel connected to everything. In that moment, you're just connected to everything, and everything's just, like you said, breathing. You breathe in and you breathe out, and you're breathing with them. When I'm doing that, I feel them. I really feel them, and it's a great feeling. And I have a lot of gratitude in those moments. Like, just thank you. You were talking about them being humble, and I have such gratitude for an ancient being that just doesn't get praise or accolades, because trees are not super glamorous. They're becoming more glamorous, but as plants and trees are not super glamorous, and to me they are, though. So thank you. I appreciate you asking that. Yeah, I love them. I just love them. Like you said, when you came on, you're like, I just love plants. I was like, oh, I like you so much, Sarah. Like, I totally feel you.
You're amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's so amazing.
I can tell you have a podcast. So speaking of your podcast, tell us about your podcast real quick. Let me put it up here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I have the Plant Spirit podcast, which everything in my life is done in collaboration with the plants, whether that is actually talking about them or doing the financial coaching. And so with the podcast specifically, and so this actually was directly guided by the plants in exploring many different ways of connecting with plants, because what the plants told me is, okay, yeah, it's great the way that I connect with plants. Awesome. But maybe not everyone speaks that kind of language, the way that I talk about them, or wants to connect in that way. And so there are literally as many ways to connect with plants as there are people on the planet. And so in the Plant Spirit podcast, I interview different people and the ways that they work with plants, which could be through art, it could be through cooking, it could be through herbs, it could be, I love to meditate with plants, like it could be through that as well. And so by basically platforming these multiple different ways that it's possible to connect in with nature and with the plant realm, the entire intention of the podcast is to help people discover what their own unique way is. Because maybe for you it's like through music or something, and like the plants love music. And so yes, that to recognize that there's no one, sometimes people will say, oh, well, do I need to go and become a clinical herbalist and, go through this, get certified? And it's like, no. If that is what you want, if that is what you feel called to do it. But if there is something else, some other way that you feel called to connect with nature, do that instead. The plants don't care. They do not care what the way is. They just want to have that relationship with humans again. That's like they've been missing us, So they love being in relationship. And so I get so excited. Oh my goodness, so excited when we connect with them from a space of authenticity, from the heart, that this is so, so important, and they love it. So so that's what the Plant Spirit podcast is all about. So then again, you can check that out on any of your favorite podcast platforms.
It's great, y'all. I've listened to several of them. It's very informative and entertaining. And like she is right here, she's just like that on the show. Very energetic. Real quick, I'm going to put your Instagram up here. Do you still I had read something about you using having a clothing line. Do you still have a clothing line with your sister?
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my goodness, yes. I obviously am a very multi-passionate person. So also my sister and I, when we were 7 and 14, had this dream to start a clothing line. And this past year, we have opened up an Etsy shop. It's called, you can Google it, find it at plantspiritdesigns.com. and that will take you directly to the Etsy shop. Again, that's plantspiritdesigns.com. And so Emma is an incredible artist, and so she does a lot of these designs that she has created. I was just wearing one of her sweatshirts earlier today. It's of Rose, of course, love Rose. But yeah, you can find a lot of, fun cheeky mugs and just fun plant-based, a lot of eco apparel, organic clothing, things like that. So you can check that out as well. Thanks so much. And thanks for, plantspiritdesigns.com. Thanks so much.
Is it with an S at the end of it like that?
It is. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, okay, awesome. Well, I know we're coming up on time, and I want to be courteous of your time. Sara, I want to thank you so much for coming on here. This has been so fun. I want to call you tomorrow and be like, so tell me more. So anytime you want to come back, we'd love to have you. But yeah, y'all check her out. Her Instagram, she was, I found her via Instagram. It has so much cool stuff on her Instagram. It's just really cool. She's so kind to reach, you can reach out to her, and you're actually talking to her. And so it's pretty cool. If you need some financial assistance of how to navigate this, I love the attitude that you have towards this, and bringing in super conscious work or subconscious work. And that's a whole nother thing. I really wanted to ask you more about that too. It's let's get into consciousness here. So we'll have to, if you ever have time, we'd love to have you back and just talk about that. But thank you so much, Sara, for coming on our show. We so appreciate having you.
Oh, thanks so much, Suzanne. So great to connect today.
Thank you. And all of y'all have a great day out there. Go hug a tree. We will see you next time.